You are listening to the Foreign Policy Focus podcast.
We cannot wait for the final proof. The smoking gun could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Haven't you driven enough people from their homes already? Bulldoze their villages, seize their property and their laws. They had no part in making it.
Now working in Libya with friends and allies, we've demonstrated what collective action can achieve in the 21st century.
Now the host of the show, Kyle Ansel.
This is episode 426 of the Foreign Policy Focus podcast. On today's show, I'm doing a review of the new movie, The Report, about the U.S. torture program after 9/11, and the efforts to release a report about that to inform the American people of the crimes of the Bush administration. The movie's now out on Amazon Prime. I'm sure I'll have spoilers in the movie. I mean, it's pretty accurate. So if you know the torture report and the U.S. torture program story, then there won't be any like bombshells to you, I don't think. But at the same time, if you would rather watch the movie before listening to the show, we all know somebody that has Amazon Prime. So, go check out the movie and then come hop back on and listen to the show. But if you want to know some details about it, here we go. So, I'm not a pop culture guy. My thing is reading world news and learning about foreign policy. So I don't know who, a lot of actresses and actors are, especially anybody new in the past few years. The main character, Daniel Jones, who is Dianne Feinstein's staffer that led the committee looking into torture to kind of see what all happened during the Bush administration, is played by, I think his name is Adam Driver. He played the new Darth Vader in the new Star Wars movies. I've only seen the first one. I didn't think it was very good, so I didn't watch the rest. But anyways, I thought his performance was overall pretty good. The woman who played Dianne Feinstein, I thought did a fine job. The guy who played John Brennan looked just as ugly as John Brennan does, so that was nice. I didn't notice any, bad performances, but I'm not a movie critic of any kind. So if somebody comes up with like, Kyle, that movie was absolute garbage, based on kind of aesthetic Hollywood standards or anything, I don't know. It seemed fine to me, but that's not necessarily where I'm here to evaluate the movie. I do feel like, if you show that movie to your friends, though, they will like it. And, that's one of the good things about, I think, this movie being and staying a little bit more mainstream, is that I think it'll be watchable to people who don't necessarily care about foreign policy all that much. So Daniel Jones first investigated the tapes that I believe were destroyed, at least in part, by Gina Haspel, of the early torture that the Americans did right after 9/11. This was done, I believe, at an international black site, and Abu Zubaydah was one of the victims that they waterboarded. Those videos were then destroyed to cover up the torture. Again, Gina Haspel, the current director of the CIA, was involved in that. There's questions that she was actually involved in the torture of Abu Zubaydah or not, but definitely involved in the cover-up of that. Anyways, Daniel Jones first investigates that, and then, it comes up that he is now able to look into the, overall torture program itself to see what it was. They kind of point out that this is initially approved by the Senate Intelligence Committee, but the Republicans later sour on it. And so now this one guy, Daniel Jones, is left to pour through CIA documents with a team of, himself and two other people to compile a report of what happened here. Now, of course, there's, I believe, over 100 detainees in total, thousands of instances of torture, hundreds of instances, if not thousands, of waterboarding, and all these other cruel techniques that they go over in the movie. So just to understand kind of the scale of what was happening here, what this team was exposing was, the Bush administration decided after 9/11 that they could torture people. That's what they said, is that, we could do what we want. And they go through some of the legal background here. And, they really do a good job, I think, of at least identifying some of the people that were involved in all of this. The lawyer John Yoo and others in the Bush administration who pushed through this thing that basically said, as long as you're getting useful information and the person doesn't die, what you're doing is legal. And then, of course, when somebody dies, they just cover it up. So that's what the Bush administration did. They tortured people. Clearly illegal, clearly crimes against humanity, to lock people up in Guantanamo Bay indefinitely detain them, never charge them. Even when people are known to be innocent, continue to hold them, continue to torture them. Further, the Bush administration, once this starts to get exposed, then starts to lie and say that, oh, we got all this useful information out of it. It was really important. We needed this after 9/11, convincing a lot of Americans that what their country needed to do is to torture people to keep them safe. That was the extreme amount of danger that Americans were in. So that's what the Bush administration convinced people of at the time. And, these are other lies and, probably criminal offenses that could be exposed by this torture report. So just, understanding that how critical this was at the time. And while it really, probably took a bad scene in the news a lot of the time, again, I was first couple of years of college for part of this and, I wasn't paying enough attention to it, but it certainly isn't a mainstream topic all the time. It didn't capture attention like the bid for Obamacare. And when you look at the politics and how it played out, and kind of what the, I guess, common narrative is as to why the Obama administration didn't prosecute, the Bush administration for war crimes, is they wanted to move past it and they didn't want to get bogged down in politics and spend all the political capital on it. And that does come out in the movie. And while I don't think Obama's name is drug enough through the dirt for his refusal to do anything, along with Eric Holder, his attorney general, at the very least, there is an acknowledgement that the Obama White House chose not to prosecute torturers. So the committee, first looking into torture, finds this guy Abu Zubaydah, who was, I believe, the first torture victim, and he is initially captured by FBI agent Ali Soufan, and starts to talk to him and give him the information that he knows. He's then taken away from the FBI by the CIA, and they initiate their torture program against him. So the movie goes back and forth between the present, well, not the present, but the investigation, the Obama years, and then the Bush years where the torture was actually going on. So they find some revelation, and then they go back and they kind of play it back or something like that. And so I'll just talk generally about the sequence of events of the terror and how they portray the torture first. And then I'll go into more of the report side of it. So overall, I thought the torture was portrayed well in the movie, not being so gruesome and so realistic that it turns off anybody from, aside from those of us who, really choose to look into the face of the empire's crimes, who would just find it too disturbing to not watch it. But at the same time, trying to really show the severity of what happened. Another good example of this, actually, that I think everybody should share is an article from the New York Times. I'll be sure to stick it in the show notes page of this episode, that actually they published hand drawings by Abu Zubaydah of the different kinds of torture that they put him through. And of course, I'll be talking about those next. So when they show the torture, the most of it that they show is against Abu Zubaydah. I think there's a little bit of waterboarding of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, that they show, and possibly a couple other people, but mainly, that they focus on this guy's torture. And then the psychologists that the CIA used to design it, Mitchell and Jessam, are, talking about the different kinds of torture. I thought the portrayal of these two monsters was really good. I thought they looked like the monsters that they are. Evil people, these two, right? They're psychologists. They're people trained to heal the human mind, to understand ailments of the human mind in order to help people to, live better lives. And what they did is they took their knowledge of the human mind, which apparently wasn't all that great because, their program does not work at all. But they take that and they use it to try to break and destroy a human mind. And it's just one of the most disgusting things. It's like, a doctor that performs like grotesque experiments, or like the Nazi doctors and the Japanese during their, time in Imperial China, where they were just doing awful experiments on people. This is, the level of sickness of these two men. They show how, while they're torturing people, they live, lavish lifestyle, how callous they are about this. And what they're putting these guys through, and blatantly say that their goal here is to break the human mind, to make these people feel helpless and subservient. Of course, there's never a question that's raised here of innocence and guilt. It's, I guess, the narrative that they use in the movie, it's unfortunate, but I think it's what's being generally adopted by our society. It's kind of the Obama position is, well, we tortured some folks and, we did some bad things, but that time was past us and it was in the wake of 9/11. Everybody was afraid and, we had to do something to prevent another terrorist attack. We didn't know if the next 9/11 was coming tomorrow. And so, throw all the morality out the window. We could do whatever the hell we wanted during that time. And while we now acknowledge it was bad, there was nothing we could do about it. And so I do think that there's kind of an air and a narrative of that behind this movie. But, overall, that doesn't necessarily apply to these two monsters who organized the program. They also reveal how much money they made off of it, $80 million, which I thought was good as well. So, that was all, done well. They talk about the role of Gina Haspel and all this a little bit. So that's good. They use her by name. Of course, she's a current CIA director. I guess we go through some of the torture they show, waterboarding, stress positions, confinement boxes, sleep deprivation. I thought some of these scenes maybe could have been a little longer and maybe do a little bit of time-lapse stuff to show how sleep deprivation, listening to this terrible music really loud, being thrown up against the wall time and time again, would just be, really disturbing and hard. I thought they did a good job with some of the dehumanizing stuff that Mitchell and Jessom organized to have happened. The shaving of people. I don't think they did any of the kind of, they kept these people in these positions for so long they were forced to defecate on themselves. The terrible thing like that. They also don't show any of, the hunger strikes and then the forced feedings. And this is one of those things where I want to be critical and say that they should have shown a lot more. But at the same time, the more you show of this, I think the more and more of your audience it probably turns off. And so maybe the balance is nice to getting out the message that this torture was absolutely unacceptable and disgusting and terrible, but at the same time not offending your audience. I wish I had gone through a little bit more of what waterboarding actually is. As cruel and as terrible as it looked in the video, and they actually did take the extended time to really show a waterboarding, I guess, cycle or whatever, but to actually understand what it is, meaning that the human body starts shutting down, basically dying, and then it's brought back to life and how painful that is, it is really, really, I think it could have been more powerful. It could have been a little bit deeper. All right. So now I think I'm going to jump to the actual report. The guy starts with 6 staffers, goes to 3, and then it ends up being just 2. And at the end, it's pretty much just him fighting to get the executive summary released. It shows, I think, the CIA in a pretty appropriate light as far as they were more than happy to cover this up. They were more than happy to make excuses. They did everything they could to make sure Daniel Jones's report had as little information as possible. And then, of course, there's the instance of the CIA actually spying on his committee, going through his information, which was illegal. And this was, I believe the John Brennan headed CIA that did that, and how, terrible and disgusting that is. And, now, of course, this is, the great noble guy who trying to cover up terrorism, terrorism, torturing people, I guess, but, cover up torturing, as this word of gospel mouth on Russian interference in the U.S. election. Of course, this guy, he's a liar. He's a piece of crap. I guess I think Dianne Feinstein is well portrayed in the movie. At one point she says something that I thought was awesome that they put in there, but other people, might not understand it quite as much, where she says, I believe she says this to John Brennan, or she's saying this about the CIA, which is, she approves, she has signed off on the drone program, but, she was drawing a line now on covering up torture. And it's just incredible that she's like, we're now looking back on a torture program that was, absolutely, this should be investigated. People should have been thrown into jail. But anyways, this is going on in the past. She gives them a current program that's carrying out war crimes, and that's her, kind of excuse for the fact that she should be now allowed to investigate others. So that's really disturbing. Other than that, you really see how she weighs politics against the torture report. You would think, hell, if I were a senator and one of my staffers walked up to me and handed me this report, that, was about CIA torture, and I was realizing just the extent of this program and how everybody was about to get away with it, you better believe I would be standing on the Senate floor reading that for the whole country here to hear and demanding that the president and the attorney general take action. John Durham gets a few mentions in this thing, explaining that he's the special prosecutor on this who's really not cooperating and not helping out Daniel Jones. He, of course, is now heading one of the investigations into the origins of Russiagate. So while there's some people who are really optimistic about what this Durham report could reveal, one of the reasons I'm skeptical is because of his involvement and refusal not to do much about this torture thing. We also see Feinstein stonewalled by Obama when she does try to make an issue of it in a more private setting. And, I think kind of gets told that nobody's going to do anything about it. We see Daniel Jones getting upset with Dianne Feinstein a few times for her refusal to do anything about it. And, she obviously doesn't do enough here. The worst parts about the movie I thought was how it ended. I think it, tries to maybe leave it off on a little bit of a high note, or I don't know what's going on. But basically, we had this 6,800 page report that details what the CIA did and how they tortured people. And then that absolutely isn't coming out according to the government. And so then they agree to put out an executive summary that ends up being a couple hundred pages. That is then pared down to, I don't know how much of it, but it's in a lot of ways, parts of it are unreadable. It's heavily, heavily redacted. There's pseudonyms all over the place, so nobody knows who people are. And it makes it just very difficult to read. And, while it's great that there's an executive summary that came out and that this report was done, it's less than a victory. And the movie seems to end on at least a small victory, which I don't know how appropriate it is. Overall, the anti-torture theme I thought was great. Again, the portrayal of, villains in the movie, Feinstein, Tennant gets some hate, Brennan, Mitchell, Jessom, all these people look bad, and that's great. I think the overall excuse of, after 9/11, what were we supposed to do, comes through way too much, and that's unfortunate. There's this narrative here that's, kind of comes out as, I guess, the story's unfolding. And that is, even after the torture, program happens and is exposed, they really try to justify it by saying we got critical information. And so, Daniel Jones explains at one point, I believe to Dianne Feinstein, that no critical information came from the torture program, and debunks the kind of Republican talking points on the issue. My only thing is, I think he does it a little bit too quickly in the movie. And for people who maybe don't know who Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Abu Zubaydah are, and only really knew their name from the movie, it may have been a little confusing as to, why it was a really solid debunking. Nonetheless, he claims the victory laugh at the end. Everybody seems to agree with him. So I'm sure it was enough for the audience to get the point that, no, torture did not lead to the killing of Osama bin Laden. One of the other points at the end of the movie that I think it really drives home hard and well is that the CIA went through years and years of this torture program, I believe until 2007, without actually asking if it even worked. And how disturbing that is, that they tortured people for years without it working, without ever stopping to ask if it actually worked. And all the while, of course, these nut jobs, Mitchell and Jessom, were just making out like bandits with U.S. taxpayer dollars. That you would think Dianne Feinstein, when she had heard that, would just walked out on the Senate floor and been like, Mr. President, I demand you do something. At the very least, I would assume that you could probably press some kind of charges against Mitchell and Jessom, no matter what, even if they claim all kinds of different immunity or whatnot, that should have been possible. Overall, I enjoyed the movie. I felt like from a sane and watching point, it was fine. And also, as far as the narrative goes, if you only have 2 hours or 2 hours and however many minutes to throw together a movie, to make it, watchable and viewable to the mainstream public, and at the same time tell this really important story, I think they did a fairly good job. And, that's what most of the commentary I've seen, has said, especially from people who are either representing the torture victims or, were aware of the torture program. All right, well, I think that's where I'm wrapping up the show for the week. If people are looking for something to do this weekend, watch the movie. I really recommend it. And, check out all the different places I work online, like the Libertarian Institute, antiwar.com. Share the shows and all the different articles on those sites. Find me on Twitter at KYAAALE, and then patreon.com if you want to donate /Foreign Policy Focus.